The forest was too quiet. That's what Private Harold Bailey remembered most. Not the cold that gnawed through his gloves, not the scent of mud and fuel, or even the distant echo of artillery. It was the unnatural silence in the Ardennes woods that unsettled him. His unit, part of the British 6th Battalion, had pushed deeper into Belgium during the winter of 1944. They knew German forces were close, but it wasn't enemy soldiers that haunted their mindset, was what lay hidden beneath the earth. Minefields, invisible, patient killers scattered across paths and clearings. The infantry had already lost 2 men that week. Now, before advancing another meter, the commander made a decision. Send in Ricky. Ricky wasn't just any dog. He was a small, wiry Cully Alsatian mix with sharp eyes and a quiet demeanor. Originally a family pet in London, he had been volunteered by his owners to the War Dogs training school during the Blitz. Ricky had endured months of intense training, ignoring gunfire, crawling under barbed wire, and most importantly detecting the scent of explosives buried in soil. He was officially listed as War Dog No. 498A, and despite his size, he had already earned a quiet respect from the soldiers. To them, Ricky wasn't a mascot. He was a fellow soldier, one who didn't speak, but who had saved lives with every step. As Ricky was released from his handler's leash, the men fell silent. Not out of disbelief, but of reverence. He moved ahead with calm precision, nose close to the frozen ground, tail low and focused. Every few steps, he paused, sniffed. Then advanced 100 yards into the clearing, he stopped, body stiff, ears locked forward. His tail gave a subtle flick. The signal. Ricky had detected a mine. The unit's breath collectively caught. The engineers moved in carefully, digging exactly where Ricky had signaled. Within minutes, they unearthed a pressure mine, fully active. Without the dog AC intervention, any soldier stepping forward would have been killed instantly. What followed over the next hour was remarkable. Ricky found more than a dozen mines, spaced unpredictably across what had been believed to be a cleared path. At one point, a shell exploded nearby, shaking the ground and sending branches flying. Ricky flinched but didn't run. He continued his search, even after debris grazed his back and left a small gash near his ribs. Blood darkened his fur, but the dog refused evacuation. The handler tried to pull him back. Ricky resisted. He had a job to finish. When the forest was finally declared safe, the infantry advanced cautious, humbled, alive. The commander didn't speak much, but later filed an official report. In it, he wrote, "The animal displayed an extraordinary degree of discipline and bravery. I have no doubt that his actions saved every man in our unit today." Ricky, who once slept in a London kitchen beside a child's bed, had become an unsung hero on foreign soil. And though the war was far from over, on that bitter day in Belgium, a dog without rank or voice had altered the fate of an entire platoon. Ricky had not been born a soldier. Before the uniforms, the training grounds, and the battlefield, he was just a playful pup in a modest home on the outskirts of London. The Clark family had adopted him as a companion for their young son, Peter. The dog's energy was boundless, and so was his loyalty. He would follow Peter to school, wait outside, and walk him home rain or shine. During the early days of the Blitz in 1940, Ricky became a source of comfort, hiding beneath the kitchen table when bombs fell and licking Peter's face when the all-clear sirens sounded. To the Clarks, Ricky wasn't just a pet. Was family. But as the war deepened and Britain's need for resources grew desperate, a new initiative was announced. The War Dogs program. The government called upon citizens to volunteer their dogs for military service. It was not a demand, it was a request, framed in patriotism and sacrifice. Money received. Giving up a family pet during wartime felt like another form of loss. But Peter's father, a World War I veteran, believed it was the right thing to do. He sat his son down and explained that Ricky could help save lives. Tearfully, Peter agreed. Ricky was delivered to the War Dogs training school in Northoe, Hertfordshire, along with hundreds of other civilian dogs. Training was intense, and not every animal made it through. Ricky was smaller than the typical working dog, but he showed an exceptional sensitivity to smell and a remarkable focus under stress. He was taught to detect explosives, navigate obstacles under fire, and obeyed silent hand signals. Most important, he learned discipline, a kind of calm that could mean the difference between life and death in a minefield. The instructors took notice. Ricky passed every test, including the final exam, locating live explosives buried beneath varied terrain. He wasn't the fastest dog or the strongest, but he was among the most reliable. Meanwhile, the Clarks received periodic updates. Letters reported Ricky's progress, his graduation, and finally his deployment to Europe with the Royal Engineers. Peter kept a photo of Ricky on his nightstand and would tell friends at school, "My dog is a soldier now." It was a mix of pride and heartbreak, a feeling shared by many families across Britain. Their beloved pets had become instruments of war. In early 1944, Ricky landed in Normandy with his handler, Sapor Jack Bateman. The beaches had already been taken, but the danger remained everywhere. Mines, snipers, booby traps. Ricky quickly proved himself invaluable. Soldiers spoke of him with admiration. He was never loud, never panicked, just focused. Evening chows. He moved like he knew what needed to be done. By the time Ricky entered the frozen forests of Belgium that winter, he was no longer just a pet in uniform. He was a seasoned veteran, carrying on his back not just a radio and med kit. The sea was restless that morning, as if it sensed what lay ahead. On June 10th, 1944, 4 days after Ricky landed on the coast of Normandy, not far from Soar Beach. The worst of the landing chaos had passed, but the landscape remained a shattered graveyard of steel, sand, and smoke. Allied troops were pushing inland, facing fierce resistance from German units that had dug into hedgerows, towns, and farmhouses. Ricky, assigned to the Royal Engineers, disembarked with his handler, Sapper Jack Bateman, on a landing craft heavy with supplies and nerves. Ricky didn't bark. He didn't shake. His tail was low, but still. The first mission came hours later. A forward patrol had spotted a path that looked ideal for transporting equipment, but it might be mined. Engineers couldn't afford to guess. Bateman clipped Ricky's harness, checked the signals one last time, then gave a silent nod. Ricky stepped forward into a war-scarred field, ears tuned like radar dishes. He moved with surgical precision, sniffing shallow soil, disturbed by camouflage nets and footsteps. At one point he froze, then dropped to a sit, his silent warning. The soldiers moved in carefully and discovered an anti-personnel mine buried under a thin layer of dirt. It was the first of 3 found that day. News of the dog spread quickly through nearby units. Some doubted the use of dogs in modern warfare until they saw Ricky in action. Unlike the machines, he didn't malfunction in the mud. Unlike the men, he never panicked. He didn't need orders shouted across noise. A glance from Bateman was enough. Together, they worked dozens of patrols, clearing paths not only for infantry, but for medics and supply lines. One officer remarked in a report, "Ricky appears to possess an almost unnatural sense of presence. We have begun to trust him as one of our own." By July, the Normandy campaign had turned into a brutal slog. Fields became traps. Barns exploded without warning. Ricky was injured once when a nearby explosion shattered a wall beside him, sending wood and stone flying. He was knocked unconscious for several minutes. Bateman carried him back to camp, fearing the worst. But Ricky awoke later that night, bleeding slightly, but alive. The next morning, he insisted on walking again. Rest was not in his nature. The bond between Bateman and Ricky grew deeper with each passing day. In the silence of their marshes, there was a wordless understanding, 2 soldiers who depended on each other more than any command or doctrine. Ricky wasn't just a tool of war. He had become the soul of the unit's survival. And as the Allies moved eastward, toward Belgium, it was clear that this little dog, once a household pet in London, had become an irreplaceable force on the battlefield. By December 1944, the war had shifted again. The Allies, believing the Germans were on the brink of collapse, pushed toward Belgium with cautious optimism. But what awaited them in the Ardennes forest was not surrender, It was a trap. Hitler had launched a surprise counteroffensive now known as the Battle of the Bulge. The forest, covered in snow and silence, became one of the deadliest battlefields of the war. It was here, amid the frozen trees and deceptive calm, that Ricky and his handler, Sapper Jack Bateman, faced their most dangerous assignment yet, clearing a suspected minefield under direct threat of enemy fire. The orders were clear. A path had to be cleared for a column of troops and supply trucks to advance before nightfall. Intelligence suspected the Germans had buried mines along a forest corridor, using new pressure-activated types that couldn't be detected by standard equipment. The only option was to send in Ricky. As Jack clipped the harness onto his partner, he whispered words the others couldn't hear, something between a prayer and a promise. Ricky looked up, eyes steady. Then he stepped into the white silence. Paw by paw, the snow crunching faintly beneath him. The men watched, breath held, rifles slung low, not daring to move. Ricky's body lowered slightly, nose sweeping side to side. Then, 10 paces in, he stopped cold. He turned his head sharply to the left, then sat. It was the signal. The engineers crept forward with surgical care, probing where Ricky had indicated. Sure enough, they unearthed a mine. Partially covered in snow, it was active. A single step from a soldier would have triggered it. Ricky moved again, stopped. Another signal. And then another. 5 mines in the first 30 yards. Suddenly, a rifle shot rang out from the trees. German snipers. The men hit the ground, yelling for cover. Ricky froze in place, exposed and still. A second shot cracked through the air, striking a tree just feet from him. Jack shouted, heart racing, desperate to call him back. But Ricky didn't move. After what felt like an eternity, the sniper fire ceased, either redirected or withdrawn. Only then did Ricky resume. Slowly, carefully. His discipline was unshakable. He wasn't done. The path he cleared that day stretched over 150 yards. It took hours. The cold seeped through boots and bones, but no one complained. They knew Ricky was doing something no man could. When they finally reached the clearing on the far side, not a single life had been lost. The commander, visibly shaken, approached Jack and said, "We asked too much of that dog, and he gave us more than we deserved." That night, Ricky was given a blanket, 2 cans of meat, and a spot near the fire. No medals were pinned, no speeches made, but every man in that camp knew they had walked out of the forest alive because of him. The morning after the Ardennes mission, frost still clung to the ground like a second skin. The unit moved slowly now, not just from exhaustion, but from a new kind of caution. They had seen what lay beneath their very steps. Ricky walked slightly ahead of Jack, tail lowered, head high. He didn't show pain, though the men could tell he was stiff from the day before. The small cut on his side had scabbed over, but the cold didn't make it any easier. Still, when the command came to move toward the next village, Ricky was the first to stand. Always say, what? Their next objective was a narrow dirt road leading to an abandoned farmhouse, believed to be a potential German fallback point. Ricken reports hinted at something more dangerous: booby traps and anti-infantry mines, likely left behind to stall Allied progress. The road looked peaceful, flanked by trees, stripped bare by winter. But the silence felt forced, unnatural. Ricky's ears twitched. He paused at the road's edge, refusing to take another step. Jack knew that Ricky had sensed something invisible to human eyes. Jack signaled the rest of the unit to halt. Ricky moved forward slowly, sniffing intently. Halfway down the path, he stopped. Then he sat his unmistakable signal. Jack approached cautiously, but before they could investigate, there was a snap of wire triggered by a branch displaced by one of the rear soldiers stepping off the path. A hidden mine exploded not far from where Ricky had just cleared. The blast shook the air, throwing men to the ground. Ricky yelped sharply, then ran not away, but toward the source of the sound. There, in the smoke and confusion, a young private was down, bleeding and disoriented. Another mine could be nearby, but Ricky didn't hesitate. He dashed to the soldier's side, barking urgently, circling him without stepping outside the cleared zone. His behavior was a clear warning: don't move. A second explosive device was later found just feet from the soldier's left hand. Ricky's intervention had likely stopped a second detonation. Jack pulled the soldier out carefully, while Ricky kept pacing the edge like a sentry. When the situation calmed, Ricky was found lying near the crater, breathing hard, one paw slightly twisted. He had strained himself during the run. Jack wrapped the limb, whispering softly, "You did good, bye." "You did more than any of us could." The unit stayed quiet. No one made jokes. There was only the sound of wind moving through bare trees and the soft breathing of a tired dog who had once again given everything without question. In that moment, surrounded by shattered earth and shaken men, it was clear Ricky wasn't just following orders. He was leading through instinct, courage, and a willingness to sacrifice that no one had taught him. But somehow, he had always known. The snow had turned gray from soot and ash as the unit reached the outskirts of a ruined Belgian village. It was clear they de-entered another battlefield long after the fighting had passed, but not before it had left scars. The buildings stood half-collapsed, their windows blown out, doors hanging from twisted hinges. Ricky limped slightly as he walked ahead of the men, his injured paw now wrapped in fresh gauze. Jack had insisted on carrying him for part of the way, but Ricky refused, pushing himself upright every time. He wanted to work. That was his nature, but now even he couldn't hide the fatigue. That night, as artillery thudded faintly in the distance, Jack sat beside Ricky and pulled a letter from his pack. It was from Peter Clark the Boym, who had once called Ricky his best friend. The letter had traveled across countries, finally reaching the front lines. "Dear Ricky," it read, "I hope you are safe. We think about you every day. I know you are doing brave things. Please come home soon." Jack folded the letter slowly, ice stinkened, and placed it near Ricky's head. The dog sniffed it gently, then rested his chin on Jack's boot. The next morning, a command vehicle arrived with new orders. The unit would be advancing further east by dawn. There would be no time to arrange an evacuation. The medic pulled Jack aside and asked, "Can he even walk that far?" Jack looked at Ricky already, standing, tail low but moving. "He'll make it," Jack replied, not because he knew, but because he couldn't imagine walking forward without him. They marched through sleet and silence, every step a reminder of how far they'd come. Ricky moved slower now, but he never lagged behind. The men adjusted their pace to match his. No one questioned it. Ricky had bled with them, warned them, saved them. If he needed time, they would give it. By the end of that day, Ricky collapsed from exhaustion. The medic wrapped him in a blanket and placed a ration tin beside him. Jack sat close, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. War demanded everything, and Ricky, without command or complaint, had given more than most men ever would. By early 1945, the Allied forces were pushing through the final stretch toward Germany. For Ricky and his unit, it meant endless patrols, shifting terrain, and the quiet knowledge that every step forward came at a cost. Ricky had survived landmines, sniper fire, exhaustion, and injury, but now his role was finally coming to an end. Commanders had started rotating out worn units, and dogs like Ricky were being considered for return to Britain. There was relief in the air, but also something unspoken, a fear that the world would soon move on and forget. When Ricky was officially withdrawn from frontline service, Jack Bateman stood in silence. There was no ceremony, no handshake, just an order. Dog 498A to be transported to Veterinary Corps and repatriated. That was it, a number on a piece of paper. But to Jack and the others, Ricky was far more than a serial number. He was the reason many of them were alive. So Jack did something he hadn't done in months. He wrote a letter, A full-page report addressed to the War Office, recounting Ricky's actions, the minefield in Belgium, the sniper encounter, the rescue of the wounded private. He ended it simply. "I believe this animal deserves recognition equal to the men he served beside." Weeks pass. Ricky was already back in England, recovering at a military kennel near Aldershot. He was thinner than before, slower to stand, but still alert. The staff noted his quiet temperament and decorated his crate with a small handwritten note. "Hero of the Ardennes." Then one day, something changed. On March 29, 1947, 2 years after his heroic mission, Ricky was officially awarded the Dickin Medal. The citation read, "For bravery and devotion to duty under hazardous conditions during mine clearance operations in 1944. At the ceremony, his original handler Jack Bateman stood beside him in uniform, placing the bronze medallion around Ricky's neck. There were cameras, journalists, and for the first time, applause just for him. Ricky didn't react to the attention. He simply stood still, tail low, eyes calm as if unsure what all the fuss was about. Not every soldier gets remembered. Not every act of heroism makes it into history books. But Ricky's medal was more than a decoration. It was a symbol for every animal who had served and suffered in silence. Without fanfare, without glory, just duty. Jack leaned in during the ceremony and whispered into Ricky's ear. They finally saw what we always knew. When the war finally ended in 1945, the world celebrated with parades, flags, and tears of relief. But for Ricky, there were no crowds waiting. He was one of thousands of military animals being processed through demobilization stations across Britain. His medals were documented, his number recorded one final time. War Dog No. 498A. The paperwork noted he was eligible for return to his original owners. But even that wasn't guaranteed. Many war dogs were never reunited with their families. Some were adopted by handlers, others deemed too changed for civilian life. Ricky's fate hung in the balance. Meanwhile, in a quiet London neighborhood, still bearing scars from the Blitz, young Peter Clark stood at the front gate of his home every afternoon. He hadn't seen Ricky in years. He barely remembered what his dog looked like, only how it felt to have him close during the air raids. When the Clark family received the telegram from the War Office confirming that Ricky was alive, had served honorably, and was being returned, they wept. Peter didn't sleep the night before Ricky's arrival. He sat by the window with a blanket, watching the street, heart pounding at every passing car. The military truck that finally arrived was ordinary. No ceremony, just a quiet stop in front of the Clark house. When the back door opened, Ricky stood hesitantly. Harness removed, tail stiff. The soldier gently called his name. Ricky stepped down, scanning the unfamiliars. He looked older now, grayer around the muzzle, thinner, with a long scar near his ribcage. But when Peter whispered, "Ricky," something flickered. The dog turned, eyes locked, and then he ran awkwardly at first, then with growing speed straight into Peter's arms. It wasn't the same dog who had left years earlier. War had changed Ricky, as it had changed millions. He startled easily, reacted cautiously to loud sounds, and had moments of restlessness at night. But slowly, with time and patience, he began to adjust. The Clarks gave him a quiet space in the house, his own bed, and plenty of affection. He never returned to the energetic puppy Peter remembered, but he found peace. And more importantly, he was home. Neighbors came to visit. Some brought gifts. Others just wanted to see the dog from the war. Peter proudly showed them Ricky's Dickin Medal, framed on the wall beside a photograph of him in uniform. Ricky would sit calmly during these visits, accepting head pats and treats. Eyes gentle but distant, like he carried memories too heavy to share. In the years that followed, Ricky lived a quiet, comfortable life. He never went on long trips again. He never wore a harness, and though he would never speak of what he had seen, his silence told stories no words ever could. Years passed quietly after Ricky's return. The post-war world moved forward, fast and hungry for normalcy. Cities were rebuilt, uniforms were folded and stored away, and medals were hung on walls or hidden in drawers. People spoke less of the war. It was too painful, too complicated. But in the Clark household, one part of that war lived not in words, but in the quiet presence of a dog who had seen too much, and yet remained gentle through it all. Ricky no longer needed to serve, but somehow, even in peace, he continued to comfort. Peter, now a teenager, would often sit with Ricky in the evenings, brushing his aging fur. Sometimes he would ask about the war not to Ricky, but to his father, who had read every report Jack Bateman had sent after Ricky's demobilization. Did he really save lives? Peter would ask, and his father would nod. More than we'll ever know. Ricky had never barked for recognition. He had never demanded attention, but his presence carried weight. A silent reminder of courage that required no audience. The Dickin Medal, polished and preserved, remained a symbol in the Clark home not of glory, but of sacrifice. Visitors often asked to see it. Some were surprised that such a small, unassuming dog could have done something so extraordinary. But those who looked into Ricky's eyes understood. There was depth there. Not sadness, exactly, but a kind of knowing, as if he carried names and places inside him, never to be spoken aloud. As Ricky aged, his movements slowed, his hearing dulled, his eyes clouded, but he remained loyal, following Peter from room to room, always keeping close. On quiet days, he would sit by the front window, watching the street like he had once watched the fields of Belgium. The clocks never disturbed him during these moments. They believed rightly. Some part of Ricky was still on patrol, still guarding those he loved. In his final years, Ricky became a symbol beyond his family. He was invited to small veteran events, honored in local newspapers, and once featured in a BBC radio segment about wartime animals. But Ricky never seemed interested in crowds. He was calm, composed content, simply to be present. The world changed around him, but he remained the same, silent, loyal, watching. And when the time came quietly, in his sleep, curled in the same spot he had claimed years before Ricky passed away, there was no fanfare. Just a family gathered in silence. No one spoke for a long time. Because some stories don't need to be told aloud to be remembered forever. Long after the war had ended and Ricky had taken his final breath, his story remained quiet but unforgotten. The Clark family buried him in their backyard, beneath a modest headstone carved with the words, "He saved lives in silence." For years, Peter would place flowers there on Remembrance Day, not out of obligation, but from a place of deep gratitude. Ricky had not just returned home, he had carried pieces of war with him, absorbing its pain so others could survive. In doing so, he became something more than a pet, more than a soldier. He became a legacy. The Dickin Medal, framed beside Peter's military memorabilia years later, stood as a rare symbol of what animals had contributed to the war effort. Only a select few creatures, dogs, pigeons, horses, had received it, and even fewer had stories as complete, as visible, as Ricky's. His actions during the mine-clearing missions in Belgium were cited in training manuals for war dogs long after, teaching new generations of handlers what calm, courage, and instinct truly meant under pressure. Historians began to reference Ricky in lectures and publications not just for his individual heroism, but as part of a broader narrative about unsung participants of the war. He had no voice, no political allegiance, no ideology, and yet he had risked his life without hesitation. That contradiction essence in the face of destruction made Ricky's service resonate beyond military circles. He represented the quiet sacrifices made by thousands who would never see their names etched into stone or printed in textbooks. Peter grew older, became a teacher, and often shared Ricky's story with students during lessons on history and ethics. He spoke not of glory or medals, but of duty, loyalty, and the unmeasurable value of empathy even in wartime. Ricky never chose to go to war, he would say, but when he was called, he served with more courage than most could imagine. And every time, students listened in silence. Today, Ricky's Dickin Medal remains preserved by the People's Dispensary for Sick Animals, displayed with pride among stories of other animal heroes. His photo, a simple image of a lean, alert collie, sits beside his citation. Visitors stop, read, and often pause. They don't need to know everything to feel what Ricky gave. His silence speaks. In the end, Ricky's story isn't just about a dog. It's about duty without demand, sacrifice without recognition, and love without condition. His legacy isn't measured in medals or monuments, but in the lives he saved, the hearts he touched, and the quiet reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come on four legs and without a single word.